Good evening. I would like to call to order the Tuesday, May 19th meeting of the Monmouth City Council and ask our city recorder, Pam Dornbush, for the roll call, please.
Councillor Belts has been excused this evening. Councillor Carey,
Here.
Councillor Lopez,
Present.
Councillor McKeel, here. Councillor Oberst,
Here.
Councillor Ridgway,
Here.
Mayor Kuntz.
Present. And Councillor Ridgway, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Tonight, we start, as usual, with our consent calendar. We do have a couple of items in there, if you'll notice. The meeting minutes of our last regular meeting prior to our budget hearing meetings, so April 21st. And then there's also a resolution to correct a clerical order on a prior resolution. And that was a numbering issue. So those two things are actually in the consent calendar. And so I will entertain additions, corrections, questions, or a motion.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Oberst for the motion and Councillor McKeel for the second. All in favor? Please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, thank you very much. We'll get that resolution numbering situation corrected. And that does bring us to public comment this evening. We do entertain public comment for 3 minutes. And tonight we do have a public hearing on our transportation systems plan, but we will start with items not on the agenda. And I will call forward Joan Bostrom.
Joan Bostrom, 14920 Ferns Corner Road, Monmouth 97361. This like that? Okay. Confusion reigns. State of Oregon uses PSU population numbers. Former Monmouth Comprehensive Plan PSU forecast for 2020, 15,117 Monmouth residents, 15,117 2020. No wonder emergency bills passed under Tina Kotek's auspices, fogging transparency to all Polk County inhabitants. A proclaimed housing crisis existed. And PSU used the unit method. Census instructions tell WOU students to use their university address, not their parents' address. PSU revised population December 2024, going into 2025 last year, 11,516, a big drop, minus 1,500 off-campus WOU students, minus 1,156 on campus, equals 8,900 approximate round year residents. Monmouth's true population less than 10,000. How wrong fuzzy math, fuzzy projections can be. Real numbers need investigation. Using inflated 15,117 people, Johnson Economics Land Needs Assessment 2020 finding Finding there is currently sufficient buildable capacity within Monmouth UGB to accommodate total projected need. That was using only 15,117. Now, inflated estimates can be crazy. Wrong to base land use decisions can be made. Support the two council members who voted for truce on 2502, that we need to know what the real numbers are. Thank you.
Thank you. And Priscilla Kimmon.
Priscilla Cannon, 662 Orchard Drive, Monmouth. I'm here tonight to talk about the homeless shelter and what I've witnessed in the last 2 weeks here in West Monmouth. There's a growing number of rubbish or trash out in both the parking lot and the rear area. Everything in the parking lot you can note just by driving on Stadium Street. There's everything from a ladder to tires, gas can, extra bikes, boards, wood, totes, trailers, and more. The garbage area is a contention for months. I've worked with Officer Ledoux and was contacted by him many times. I've also talked to the chief. He felt that there was a possible health issue with the family living so close to the receptacle and the garbage just flowing all around that area. Again, it's high levels of garbage, furniture, anything you could imagine, a rat infestation. On April 29th, my son was exiting our home on Orchard and was approached by a man with a bag over his shoulder asking for bottles and cans. This is in my neighborhood, in front of my house. My son said that he had nothing and proceeded to get into his vehicle, but he watched him as he crossed the street to an elderly neighbor who was exiting her car. They exchanged briefly, and he continued up the street. Last Friday afternoon, I was getting out of my car to drop a package at the post office at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I saw a man standing near the door with a bicycle leaned up against the wall. He asked me if I had any extra change. I just shook my head. I went in and shared with the clerk, who was the only staff at that time, and asked if it was okay for someone to panhandle on federal property. She didn't know, but she couldn't ask the postmaster because he had already left, and she was the only person there. So I decided when I left, and the panhandler was talking to another young man who was getting out of his car to go into the post office, and the man said he didn't have any change, but he had some cans in the back seat. So he went and got the cans, and I watched all this take place. I got into my car and decided I would call the police. So I called and spoke, and as I was backing up, the guy saw me on my phone and proceeded to get on his bike as I was giving the police officer a description of the man and the bike as he was, and which direction he was riding to. And they called me back later and wanted more information. On Monday, when I was returning from Dallas via Stadium Drive, I saw a guy.
Right. You
Thank you.
want to submit something in writing, you're welcome to do so. All right, and David Pastor.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and councilors. I'll cover several things quickly. So much to say, so little time. 3 minutes, way too little. I feel bad for Ms. Kennan because she had a lot to say and there's a severe problem and you only heard a portion of it. And I apologize to people that were here without headphones. It's difficult to understand. I've complained about that multiple times. I don't think it's even in the budget to be fixed this next year. I hope it is, but it really is a problem and people can't hear. And in the homelessness situation that she was talking about, I concur. I worked with those who were drug addicts and alcoholics. And one of the problems that I see with that facility is no accountability. They can live there and do whatever they want. And if you give people expectations and hold them accountable, many of them will change. But if you just give them free food, free lodging, they can go outside and smoke, which I don't know how you can afford to buy cigarettes at the cost they are if you don't save up.
Did you want to speak on your topic?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Long introduction.
You had a topic.
Okay, to accountability. So, and that's in reference to, how's my time doing? The clock, by the way, is difficult to follow because it shows minutes and not the total time. Does that mean I have 2 minutes left or 1? Okay, good. Thank you. It would be not, oh, can barely see the 1. So accountability. I think it's important for the council to hold staff accountable. And you saw in my letter that I sent to you, and I'm not going to comment much on it tonight, that I think there is a time to hold them accountable. There's information, unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be accidental. It seems to be intentional, just misleading both the public and you. And for people that are visiting and they've been here, they have, I apologize again because this has to do with the House Bill 2647 and the approval to bring in 80 some acres to the city. What I gave to you today, though, I want to talk about in the 1 minute that I have remaining, and that is what you may say is not, the decision you made is not a land use decision. I remember hearing Ms. Duffner say that and was shocked that legislative amendment 2502 is not a land use decision. That's incorrect. If you look at the handout I gave you, you'll see that there is several things quoted, and I don't have any time to go through it in detail. It's a complex issue. And this is the frustrating thing. It's so extremely frustrating. You say you want public involvement, and you give us no time to explain ourselves in a cordial and logical and reasonable way. I don't really believe that you do want the public to know. I don't know why you would do it that way, because you're elected officials and you should be supporting of the public, but you give us 3 measly minutes and that's it. And you can do much more, Mayor, if you prefer to. You could give us 5 minutes and we would only, and I wouldn't want to repeat myself. I don't know why you didn't do that. Read through what I gave you tonight. You'll see that there's a law that says it is it is a land use decision. And I would like the attorney to respond to that in the next meeting. Thank you.
Yep, we have your written materials and we'll read through them and we'll have the attorney has your contact information, can respond to your questions. Thank you. All right, before we begin our regular business agenda this evening, we do have something I'd like to bring to the attention of our council and community. I'd like our Chief Isaiah Haynes to come forward. Chief, sorry.
Yeah.
I am extremely proud to present to you the winner of the Oregon Association Chiefs of Police Max Patterson Award. Chief Isaiah Haynes was recognized by his peers, and this award is in recognition of exceptional commitment to the healthy development of youth and the strengthening of community trust in law enforcement. Through your initiative and perseverance, you brought the nationally recognized Tall Cop Say Stop program to Monmouth, creating a rare and impactful opportunity for parents, educators, health professionals, and law enforcement partners to engage together around the challenges facing today's youth. Your efforts equip dozens of families and practitioners with critical insight into emerging drug trends, enabling earlier and more effective intervention. You have demonstrated that prevention, collaboration, and education are not merely programs, but a philosophy of leadership. Your work reflects a deep and genuine concern for the well-being of young people and the community you serve. And in doing so, you embody the servant leadership, innovation, and integrity that define the spirit of the Max Patterson Award. I know he wishes he'd sent Olafson tonight. It's a huge honor, and apparently they don't give that award out every year. That is when they give rarely. So we're super honored to have our chief recognized. That takes us to our business agenda this evening. And this is an opportunity to finish up a process or take the next step in a process we've had undergoing for a long time. And that is our public hearing and consideration of adoption of our transportation systems plan. So we're going to call up the guy who got this dumped on his lap a little bit, David Carr, with our consultants. And I will read our legislative hearing script before we begin this evening. We have a public hearing on Legislative Amendment 25-03 to consider adoption of the Transportation Systems Plan, TSP. The City Council will receive testimony, and at the close of the public hearing, will make a final decision whether to adopt or not adopt the proposed amendments based on the complete record, including the testimony received at tonight's public hearing. These proceedings are being recorded. This hearing will be held in accordance with the land use procedures required by the city and the state of Oregon. This is a type 4 legislative procedure. For anyone wishing to speak, and we will have an opportunity for public input on this hearing, we ask you to please use the speaker cards that are provided. When called upon, you must be recognized. You will state your name, address for the public record, and testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. Before we begin, does any counselor wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in this matter? Great. Seeing none. So at this point, I will open the hearing for LA 25-03, our transportation system plan, and ask for our staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilors. David Carr, Public Works Director. I have with me Anthony from DKS and Associates. He was kind of the lead on preparing this TSP for the city. I'm going to just go through the summary here real quick and point out some elements in the plan regarding some questions that had previously been brought up that I think need some clarification. So what we're doing here is this is a new TSP. Obviously, we're trying to get updated in accordance with what is acceptable practices and standards. Currently, our last TSP is from 2009. That's getting out there a ways for a transportation master plan. Things change a lot very fast in the transportation industry. In the background, it's our long-range planning document. It allows us to budget, and I've spoken to this numerous times with our outdated master plans. This is what gives us that vehicle to assign budgetary numbers to these project lists. I'll go through the real high level of project list here in a second. And it's keep the city in compliance with the transportation planning rule, statewide planning goal 12, and supporting future growth or anticipated future growth as best as we can. This process involved a 15-member project advisory committee, which was very involved in the process, which was a good thing to see, which we typically don't see. It had representatives from ODOT, Polk County, Independence, Western Oregon, Chariots, the police department, and the Monmouth Transportation Commission, along with a few community representatives that were on that pack. So this had a lot of input. That's a pretty big pack group for a document. We focused on several things: improve transportation safety, and these align with council goals that have been established for transportation elements in the city. Enhancing mobility and accessibility, that was a pretty big one, council goal. Strengthening the connectivity and system functionality, supporting livability and economic opportunity, And then encouraging regional coordination, collaboration. That's why we had Polk County, Independence, some of those other jurisdictions at the table to discuss, because Independence, we have over, we border each other and there's some roads right on our border. So having input from both jurisdictions was very helpful. We have 90 transportation projects and improvements identified throughout the community. That kind of speaks to, having built off a plan from 2009, it leaves some pretty big gaps. And didn't give us that mechanism we needed to budget properly to accomplish some of these projects. Some of them are street extensions, roadway improvements. The big one, Gwynn Street, right? We all know about that, which is going to be done next year. Intersection upgrades, urban street enhancement, transit related improvements, to build off of the trolley and some of those transit elements that have come into Monmouth and been functioning at a higher level than I think most of us anticipated. And then the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure projects. The total estimate for all the projects identified was $173.8 million. Obviously, we don't have $173 million. So Anthony developed a financially constrained list, things based on the priorities of the PAC and city council goals, what would be ones that were realistically achievable within our current budgetary restrictions for streets. So we ended up with 37 prioritized projects. If you want to, you don't have hard copies, do you? So if you go to page 35, that's the financially constrained project list. That is a page and a half. But if you look, the entire first page, except for the first two top projects, are all ped and bike improvement projects. So this is 35. Yes, sorry. And going on to the next page, there's two more on that page. So there was a real big focus on creating some of those low pressure bicycle corridors and some of those things, and trying to weigh what those projects impacts would be. For example, on-street parking is obviously the first thing that's impacted with bicycle lanes and some of those things. So we're trying to consider some alternative cross sections. We did revise our cross sections too. And that kind of goes, I'll just keep going. How about that? So one big thing we did is it's been a standard of practice across the state for landscape strips. We incorporated landscape strips into our typical sections. We've reduced some of the right-of-way width requirements for some of our streets. I'll use local as an example. Our previous requirement was 60 foot. We dropped that to 56 feet. And all these things contribute to helping some of these projects develop more efficiently, more appropriate within what the standards are for transportation and connectivity and some of those things. 6 foot sidewalks are standard now on our new, I think our previous one had 5 foot, if I'm correct, which is still meets all the standard, but 6 foot makes for a much better two-way pedestrian transition, being able to travel and pass somebody walking the other way. 5 foot gets pretty close, especially if you're trying to pass me on the sidewalk. Planning Commission heard this on April 15th at their Planning Commission meeting and recommended to bring it to council for approval. I do not have the ordinance right now. I will bring the actual ordinance back after we get through this for the actual ordinance approval. My understanding is that encompasses the adoption of the TSP and all of the code revisions at the same time, so there won't need to be two parallel processes there. I think I've covered kind of the big things for this TSP. If Anthony's here, if we got technical questions, process questions, I know this is the original goal for this was, I think, to be adopted last October. I'm here now trying to get it adopted. It did take a little while. I think some of the code analysis and the changes that were required to make sure our code lined up with what we're proposing here in the TSP. That's a little bit of an effort to accomplish that. It's kind of tedious work, but And all those code revisions have been run by ODOT, who is a reviewing authority, and we have their buy-in on all that. So it's fully vetted. We're ready to go. Code revisions, everything's been updated. It's just taken us a little bit to get here, but I think we've got a really good, solid plan in front of us with some realistic projects to accomplish within our current budget.
Great. Any questions of staff? Counselor Oberst?
I would just note that this project process started when I was the council liaison to the Traffic Safety Commission, which no longer exists. It's now the Transportation Commission. And Anthony, good to see you. It's been a while, but many meetings over this. What I've seen of this plan is I'm very excited about, and it takes us into paying attention to more than just traffic and really looking at transportation as sort of a big piece. And I want to thank both of you and Russ and everybody on the Transportation Commission and all the volunteers who put in their 5 cents worth for the work on this. And I'm not surprised it took longer than expected because there are some significant changes. So thanks. That's all. Don't really have questions. Just wanted to comment on this process.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't bring up is it wasn't just the study we did for this TSP. There were a lot of studies done prior to this that we built off of. There was a corridor study done in combination with ODOT trying to develop more efficient crossing of 99. And Anthony took all these studies that we've been doing because it's an issue, and they're folded in here appropriately.
Yes, Counselor Ridgway.
Thank you. You mentioned the change from the 5-foot width sidewalks to a 6-foot width, which, if math is correct, 20% increase in materials cost. How does that impact our ability to either refurbish existing sidewalks, which, I think several counselors are passionate about improving our sidewalks across the city. But if we have higher costs that we're up against in the future, are we limited now because of a different standard?
No, I mean, this would mostly apply to new construction. We remain pretty flexible, like on infill projects, that the sidewalk put in matches what is in the neighborhood as long as we don't violate ADA or ProAg. So if we got curb type 3-foot sidewalk, we would have them, because you don't want one lot where it stops and then it jumps out 5 feet and you have a 6-foot sidewalk. We try to remain cohesive in that entire subdivision. Some of the older parts of town down here with some of the infill duplexes and triplexes, we let them do that. If there's nothing in the area, we would push for meeting our standards. So when their neighbors come in, they're all up on the current standard. Because there is a lot of subdivisions in town that don't have any sidewalk at all in some of them. So we would try to push for that. We do have flexibility to allow narrower. The cost in concrete hasn't seen as big of an increase. It's probably a couple bucks a square foot is what we've seen. What we're seeing the massive jumps obviously is asphalt, right? Because that goes up and down with the price of oil. But we do have sidewalk grant programs too to help fund some of those differences. It's up to $2,000 for frontage and $2,500 for a corner lot. So we try to put those in place to help some people accomplish this, because we do realize cost of construction is a barrier to a lot of people.
Sure, go ahead.
And forgive me, I didn't jot down the page number, but I remember in the massive document that we reviewed, there was a graphic that showed traffic patterns along 99 potentially changing in that the lanes moving from a single lane highway to removing a median and increasing to double lanes going both directions, removing a bike lane and just, I think, narrowing the lanes slightly. Is that still a part of this plan, and what traffic changes might that bring?
I think it's referenced, but that's an ODOT right of way, which we don't have the authority over. So I think do you have, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Anthony Gamalo, DKS Associates. So that is correct. About 99, that's an ODOT facility, and City of Monmouth wouldn't have the jurisdiction to to narrow or road diet 99 through Monmouth. What it does establish, what the graphic you're referring to, I'm guessing is probably the street cross-section graphics that were included in the report. Like David said, it would more apply to new development. The idea is that this empowers your staff to push any developers that come in to construct any new infrastructure to the standards that have been identified here. Right, so not just the street widths, but the planter strips, the 6-foot sidewalks, bike lanes where called for, all of that would be according to what is established here. So, and that cost would then be passed to the developer, right? So that makes your staff's life easier to make the argument, hey, this is what we want as our standard for development. And it also empowers your staff to pursue grant funding, to update any existing infrastructure when the opportunity arises.
Much better explanation than that.
Anything else, Counselor Ober? Counselor Karen?
You know, I'm trying to get, there's a whole lot of stuff here and we don't have a lot of information on it. And that's a little disconcerting to me. You have to link off to get to the actual plan. Would have been nice to be able to get to that a little more easily. And when you were talking about page 35, I was in the wrong document. I didn't realize we're in the actual plan itself. I was on the what we started out with. But so therefore, I've got a couple questions. Let's look at page 34, I believe it is. On 34, not on the document, but on the what we were given here. And there's a chart there.
This one.
It's a grid with the different, the functional classifications of the different, and the right of way across the top.
The street cross sections, David.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. So to make sure that I'm understanding this, we've got the right of way across the top, curb to curb distance, travel lane, bike lane, on-street parking, yes or no, sidewalk, and then planter strip on all of those. And we've got so if I'm looking at the minor arterial, which I'm not sure I have a good definition of what that is. It was 70 feet. We're going to go now to 80. And you have to confirm all this stuff. If I misread it, let me know. Curb to curb is going to go from 64 to 50. Travel lane is just simply defined at 11. The bicycle lane instead of 6 goes to 8. No parking. 7-foot sidewalk. That's a 7 foot. Of course, that's a little bit larger. And then a 7.5 foot planter strip. Is that? I mean, I'm reading that correctly.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. My concern is, especially when we get down, as we work down lower, and I look at the local street, and while the right of way was 56, now it's gone to 60. No, it was 60, gone to 56. Curb to curb has gone from 48 feet to 32 feet. Travel lane is 9 feet. There would be no bicycle lane on that. And the on-street parking would be allowed 7 feet. And then a 5-foot, 5-inch. That really narrows that street up in terms of the traffic and its ability to pass, back and forth. And that's troubling to me because and I understand the logic. You make it narrower, arguably you make people more cautious and they'll drive slower. I don't know that that's the case. I think in some cases, yes, but we've got drivers that don't necessarily adhere to that. I also think that, especially in the area that we live in, the 9-foot travel lane is going to be pretty tight when you get some of the pickups running up and down that we have around here. Especially if you get those pickups parking on the sidewalk or, on the street. Further,
There's no on-street parking.
Further, in that instance, yeah, there are, but there are others up. But yeah, good correction. But the thing that I wonder about is, as we have reduced the requirement for off-street parking, we're going to drive people to on-street. And I'm just not sure how that's going to work. I don't know how we can condense things, and instead of making it more convenient, we're making it more difficult. And I'm not sure what the studies are or what the rationale is, other than what I said. And you can help me, Anthony, say it a little more articulately than I can.
I'll see what I can do. So I'll start by saying that when we enter this process from the beginning, we kind of do it, we try to do it with a blank slate, right? So we don't want to come in at the beginning and dictate to your residents. And when we do our public meetings, we're targeting a bike ped friendly plan, we're targeting a car friendly plan, or we're doing X, Y, or Z. Our job in the beginning is to listen. And what we heard from the residents here through what was really a robust public process, given the size of the city, what we heard was a desire for pedestrian and bicycle improvements by far, right? And that was reflected in the project list. That was reflected in the financially constrained project list. And part of that, to get to the local street cross section, is the narrowing down. The best practices, industry standard is that you narrow lanes, people drive slower. Parking, parallel parking on the street acts as a narrowing, slowing influence. On a local street where you don't have a lot of volume, you're not going to have any dedicated bike facility, right? Especially when you're narrowing the street up. But the generally accepted best practice is that a narrower street will result in narrower travel lanes, like 9-foot travel lanes, which are narrow, will result in slowed down traffic. And that is what that's what studies indicate. That is what the industry best practices indicate. And that goes back to the beginning of our process. We were told pretty emphatically by our public process that bikes and pedestrian efforts were to be prioritized. So that's the approach that we took.
Was there any, again, I'm still on the local street thing, any estimation on how much of that on-street parking will be occupied? Because it does allow there's 7 feet.
We didn't conduct a percentage parking study as part of this, so that would be a separate effort. So I'd be speaking out of school on that if I gave you a number. Just speaking, like off the cuff, in my experience being here, I don't think it would be a major issue. And again, this also is a cross section that would apply to new development also, right? So we wouldn't be having local streets that didn't have parking, right? We're in a new construction. We'd be calling for local streets that did accommodate that parking on both sides of the street according to this cross section. Does that make sense?
Well, except that you're narrowing it down. We're gonna. I thought I heard you say that we're gonna allow for on-street parking.
Yes.
On a narrower street.
Yes.
Yeah.
To further narrow as per that industry accepted standard that it does slow traffic.
and I don't know how you get around the on-street parking, but we've got some streets in town that are, depending on the time of day, are full. I mean, Gwen, west of 99, you know, in the evening, I mean, there's everywhere you look. You get down Catron, everywhere you look, there's vehicles, even on my street.
And these are new streets.
Well, I know, I understand, but that's what we're seemingly building toward.
The hope then is also that an increase in pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and an increased awareness of pedestrians and bicyclists citywide would encourage more folks who might not otherwise feel as comfortable to walk or bike to do so, and possibly reduce the need for the parking.
Yeah. I know that's the logic, and we've yet to see that, and hopefully we will. Hopefully we will. Well, that's it for me right now. I'll step away. I've got a couple more, but others may have some as well.
I'll just speak to that point. I spend a lot of time in the newest neighborhood in Monmouth and the newest neighborhood in Independence, which both have local streets that are nice and comfortably wide, and cars can park there and people drive pretty fast. I also take a shortcut when I'm leaving work, and I go down a street in Independence that is 10th Street, which is literally barely, I mean, it is one car at a time when cars are parked. Those have the nicest, most polite, slowest drivers of anywhere I drive. So I would love those one-lane streets everywhere. People are so stinking considerate when we get on that street.
If I could add one other thing also, a possible benefit of a narrow street like that is that it dissuades drivers from using them as cut-through traffic, right? And routes folks to collectors and arterials, which is what you would hope for, and keep those local streets local, really, to residents and visitors of that area.
Yeah, I'm a rebel about that. But, all right, Councillor McKeel.
So thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe it's because I go down these streets next to Oregon State University, but they're very narrow and they are not so friendly drivers. So it's like, who's going to play chicken to get to that spot first before you have to pull over the driveway? But I'm actually really concerned about the narrowing of the street and having, again, as Councillor Carey said, the wide pickups that we have now. And I just, when I drive down Eccles, and there are so many children down Eccles, and they have parking on both sides, and it's a very narrow street, and kids don't look, right? They go after the ball and run across. There's cars on both sides of the road, so drivers can't see the children unless they're hyper aware that there are kids that are playing with balls. And it really concerns me that we're making this more narrow, having so the proportion of the truck or the car to the street and the crowding that will be, I think is, for me, really problematic.
I understand that completely. I have two young boys who, the next time they listen to me to look both ways will be the first. So I can totally understand. And one element of the narrowing and slowing that is a benefit is that in the event that someone is struck by a vehicle, survivability goes way up below 25 miles per hour, right? And driving 25 miles per hour in a really narrow street is uncomfortable for the driver, whether or not there are pedestrians and bicyclists in the area. And particularly if there's traffic also coming the other way. So that slowing factor will improve in that sense. But in terms of children's behavior in school areas, I wish I had a solution for that. If I did, I probably wouldn't have to work my day job anymore.
Well, and I think these streets are often with lots of cars parked on the sides, accompany houses, as we talked about our codes, a couple of years ago, where we might not even have a driveway. because the developer can save money by not putting a driveway in there. And so you don't have cars leaving that. So these are going to be mostly starter homes, and starter homes would have more children. So we're putting, well, I guess for me, a hazardous road right in neighborhoods that are going to have the highest population of children. So I know, I find this pretty problematic. I mean, even with I go slower, but I'm also a grandmother and I've seen my own grandkids, right? But I don't know that every driver is going to be aware. And I think there are, younger drivers who are just trying to figure out how to get started. I'm not sure that they will be as aware or feel nervous about to drive slower.
All right, couple things. This is a public hearing, so this is really, we're supposed to be asking questions. We're not deliberating yet. So I am going to take a moment to see if we've had any public testimony submitted, or folks that wanted to speak, and then trying to ask questions. Again, we had a big work session on this, so a lot of this stuff was discussed then. It was a long time ago. And I'll have you also be reviewing the motions because the goal tonight was to adopt this as is, but there are other options. But I am going to stop and ask if we had anyone who had submitted to provide public testimony at tonight's meeting.
I did not receive any notice.
All right, nothing was submitted, so that's fine. And then I will go ahead and let other counselors speak at this point. If anyone who hasn't spoken has any questions. Thank you, Counselor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are in the deliberation portion. No, we're in the question. Oh, okay, thank you. All right. Well, very direct question. As the streets issue, I think intersects with our updated building code. There are sections of the building code that allow street frontage to count toward, for lack of a better term, I don't recall what it is, parking quotas, right? Parking requirements for that development. I would assume that if a street does not have parking on it, it does not count toward that development requirement in terms of that construction. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If there's no on-street parking available, there's nothing for them to count towards their parking requirements.
Great. Okay. That's my only question. Thanks.
Counselor Oberst.
Quick follow-up to that. Is that ability to use on-street parking to offset quotas apply everywhere, or is that only in the downtown corridor? And my recollection is that it's downtown and that it wouldn't apply if somebody, built residential.
Yeah, it typically doesn't apply during single-family residential construction, obviously.
Right.
It's the higher density. And I wanted to come back.
And I bet Suzanne knows just off the top of her head.
She does. But I wanted to come back to something real quick.
She's that good.
Roads that were mentioned, Eccles, so those have higher density development. If you want to see how this road standard will play out, go to Hoffman Meadows. That is single family with with the narrow street, where that was the first one we used that on, even though it wasn't adopted yet, but that is a good indicator of what you'll see through development with these new standards. And it does, I drive through all the time because we monitor the stormwater pond and some issues, and it does make me slow down, which not a lot of streets do, but during there, it does. Edwards is another one. We get a lot of on-street parking due to the mobile home park. And that gets really crowded, and I have to wait for the bus to pick up the kids in the morning before I can go around. But it makes me a lot more conscientious of driving those roads. Did you?
Provide some clarification.
new standard that we adopted as part of our modernization of our zoning ordinance. So it's in the parking chapter, and it is applying to residential areas outside the RS zone. So these are our higher density, medium density zones. So on-street parking can be counted towards the minimum parking space if the following conditions are met. So there's only in certain instances, right? This adjacent street has to have parking on both sides of the streets. So that has to be in place. The on-street parking spaces can be located along the frontage of the subject site. So you can't count the whole block, only the portion that abuts your parcel can you count that towards. So sometimes when you get on those cul-de-sac situations, there's really not that much on-street parking. So they don't get to count that if there's no parking there. So yeah, so that just kind of clarifies a little bit when we allow that.
So do I remember correctly that in low density, there's still a requirement for off-street parking?
Yeah, they still need to provide, I believe it is 2 spaces per dwelling, per single dwelling. ADUs are exempt from off-street parking. That's a state law that we follow.
What about medium density? Does it have any kind of requirement? And if you don't remember, that's okay. You don't have to look it up.
Sorry, so just to clarify your question, what type of housing unit are you talking about in medium density? Because the medium density has different types, duplexes, triplexes. Oh, it's getting too granular. Okay. Okay, all right, no worries.
That brings a follow-up from Councilor Ridgway. Maybe Suzanne do you need her? Or? Oh, okay. No, it's you, David and Anthony.
I guess as we look at housing in the future within Monmouth, one of the considerations that I have is cost and the cost of new development and how potential increases or decreases could impact new houses being bought and sold within the city. Are there any among all these enhancements and changes, would you consider these to be cost neutral, increase in cost versus what it would cost to currently develop under our current codes?
Yeah, I would expect developers to see cost savings for sure. Just in the width reduction in the paved surface. You know, you're not just lowering your asphalt, you're lowering all your rock prep and what has to go out behind your curbs to create a stable road. Even with the increase in the sidewalk width, the narrowing of the asphalt will make it more affordable for developers versus what our previous standard was.
And besides the cost of the concrete and the asphalt, are there other products that would be affected by these new standards?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, it should not. It should not unduly place any cost stress on the city, other than what external forces are occurring right now. And I'll reiterate that we put together a financially constrained project list that fits within the anticipated transportation budget for the city based on a look back at previous expenditures. I think we looked at the last 10 years of transportation expenditures from different sources by the city. And we just extrapolated that forward and developed the list based on that. All right, so at least the financially constrained project list, which has current project estimates, should be something that the city can more or less achieve through the project horizon, which is 20 years, and be able to do so, assuming no major change in funding. In the funding situation. I would also add that the city is not bound to just do the projects on the constrained list. The state does require that everyone do a constrained list now. But if if a grant opportunity arises that is very specific in the metrics that that are used to calculate whether a project is eligible for it, and a project that is not on the financially constrained list rises up based on that, the city can still go ahead and pursue that. And without any, there's no penalty or any explanation that is needed to the state or DLCD based on that.
I'm going to go ahead. I had one actual question, and then Councilor McKeel. There was a submission of a letter from an attorney representing a property owner who is outside the city limits on the south side of town, asking that there be some significant changes because the plan includes what technically would be a belt line or a sort of a frontage road to 99. I know this is a 20-year planning horizon, so I think it's possible to have things that are potentially 20 years away and knowing they may or may not happen. Was there any consideration of that request to remove some of those potential extensions of Southgate Drive or of Ash Creek Drive, and or just leave them in, knowing we are not likely to ever have the money for them, and or we would not develop them unless we absolutely needed to?
So, yeah, I didn't attend the public hearing last month, but according to the minutes of it, Community Planner Craig reviewed the public testimony from the Marr brothers regarding their request to remove the east-west extension of Ash Creek Drive from the plan. And he stated that because current zoning permits the extension and it aligns with long-range plans, staff finds no justification to remove it at this time. So, yeah. That was where it was left at the last meeting.
Great, thank you. All right, Councilor McKim.
So I pulled up Google Maps and had the street view of the, what is this development? Thank you, I'm so sorry. The Hoffman Meadows development. So I'm on Broadway Street. And you said that this is this is the size that's on that, listed on that chart.
Yeah, those are all local streets that were constructed there.
All right, actually, I'm not as worried after looking at what this is, so.
Yeah, that's kind of why I try to point some of that other stuff out is some of those concerns are around the higher density. So your percentage of people using the on-street parking is a lot higher. Single family residents, have the 2 parking stalls in their driveway and their garage. Not many people use their garage to park anymore. But that one, this is a larger single family development. So there was ample on-street parking between driveway accesses of residents. Yeah. Yeah.
Councilor Oberst.
This is kind of a request for future collaboration and interplay between departments. But Independence in some of their newer neighborhoods has put in green strips between the curb and the sidewalk. They're about that wide, 4 feet, I think, maybe 5, but probably 4. And they made no restriction on the trees that they required to be planted in those strips. And they have maple trees that are now 40 years old, and they're that big around. And I'm seeing sidewalks that are lifted. You can see the full 4-inch edge of the break in the sidewalk. And somebody has had the courtesy to paint them yellow. Nobody's repairing them, but they've been painted yellow so that when you trip over them, at least you were warned, I guess. I don't know. So I see we have planting strips in our plan. I applaud those. I grew up with probably 15-foot wide strips with big trees. If we're going to require these, we need a list of acceptable trees that go in those strips so we don't wind up with 2-foot caliper maple trees 25 years down the road in a 4-foot planting strip. Not going to work. So I would encourage a cooperation between Public Works and the tree board and Suzanne and the development department to come up with such a list and say what trees are acceptable in that strip. So we aren't faced with that in new development down the road after it's no longer new. It's a real problem down there, and their requirement is the same as ours. Property owners have to fix it, but I don't think anybody's telling them they need to. So,
Yeah, that's been discussed in length just because of what our previous standard was and the existing, we do have a street tree list now. But we've brought it up in discussions with Suzanne through this process that we probably need to revisit that with the landscape strips exactly for that reason. Because, you know, not only just sidewalks for property, when it pushes up curb, it gets into the asphalt. If the trees get big enough, it can really, and mitigating, you know, removing that tree, getting it out of there gets really cost prohibitive. So yeah, that's once, if this is adopted, we'll need to revisit that and some of those other things like that control trees in the right of way to eliminate that possibility. I mean, as best we can.
and Power and Light
right.
has a requirement that they not get into power lines, but that doesn't help when the power lines are underground.
Since this is not regarding the transportation safety plan, system plan, I'm going to close the public hearing and invite any council other comments or motion as available in your packet. Yeah, I don't know. You might need to stay there. You shouldn't, but go ahead. Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you would just bear with me, I'm going to make a motion. What was that?
Page 14.
14, there we go. Getting back down to it. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to recommend to adopt the legislative amendment 25-03.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
All right, moved and seconded. Thank you, Councilor Lopez and Councilor Oberst. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to speak to my motion.
Please.
Thank you. So we've had a lot of discussion here, and I think that this level of discussion is incredibly important, right? When I look back at other portions of the city, we mentioned earlier tonight, significant portions of the city that have no sidewalks, right? And that was, the best wisdom of the time. I think we can all look back and say, golly, maybe we would do it a little differently, in hindsight. And so I do want to, just applaud the thoughtfulness with which everyone's continued to engage this process so that we don't go down that same road again to make decisions that we will ultimately regret for quite a long time because those decisions end up reflecting in near permanent infrastructure. I find this process to have been incredibly thoughtful. We've been at this for a long time, so long that I think that I'll speak for myself. Maybe I actually don't even remember the beginning of this because we've had multiple town halls. We've had multiple times seeing you here in council, asking many questions. We're a very engaged bunch. Not to say that new questions don't come up and we shouldn't ask them. We absolutely should. But from memory and from doing some, question asking in the past, what these changes, and I know the cross sections with street design has been a hot topic tonight. What these changes in the street design do is going to be incredible for this city. It's going to be amazing for developers. It's going to be amazing for kids. It's going to be amazing for pedestrians, cyclists, and people who are maybe inclined to have a little bit of a heavy foot too, because it's going to dissuade them psychologically, because systems design has an impact on how we interact with the system. And so as I go down it, right, the right of way, the minor arterial increased by the right of way for minor arterials increased by 40% or 14%. That is one street in town. It's Hoffman. It's only one street that's a minor arterial. The major collectors and minor collectors, no change in right of way. Major collectors and local streets, of which there are many, decreased their right of way by 6.7%. So that's 6.7% less that a developer is going to have to devote to, building streets and giving right of way. And that turns into, their ability to craft, developments here that otherwise wouldn't happen. At the same time, it not only has those traffic calming measures, but to the point of kids, not only is there those traffic calming measures, but there's now a planter strip in between that ball that's going to roll into the street as well that wasn't there before, right? And so I see more separation between pedestrians, children, et cetera, and those traffic lanes as well. And then hearing that the studies indicate that psychologically those traffic lanes will be moving more slowly. It feels too good to be true, but it seems like a double win, right? And so, as someone who has a little guy who, isn't quite at the run into the street for a ball stage, but is in the run into the street for a butterfly or a leaf stage, this makes me happy and it makes me feel good. It feels counterintuitive to look at it like this, but when it's broken down, and we've broken it down a number of times before, and residents have been given an opportunity to put an immense amount of feedback into the system. I think you mentioned at one point that you're quite impressed by the robust level of feedback that our town has given and the number of people who have shown up to town halls and other community engagement events. This is well done. This is thoughtful, and I'm all for it. Thank you.
Councilor Opers?
I share Councilor Carey's concerns about giant pickup trucks. I found myself following a full-size dually today. And it just amazes me how wide those things are. We have a lot of big vehicles in town. That said, I also firmly believe in the notion that narrower travel lanes do result in slower traffic. I live on a traditional good old Monmouth local street, and it's wide. And people go up and down my theoretically 25-mile-an-hour street at 35 and 40 all the time. And it's directly related to the wide open vistas that they're presented with as they drive down that road. One of the things that I find encouraging, because look, we can put these new standards in place for new development. Great. What about the rest of town where we have these giant streets? And the section that deals with local street traffic calming measures is something that I have advocated for 30 years, because that's when I first started on traffic safety, close to it, and as a member of that body. And I haven't been able to get any traction with at least 3 city managers who didn't want to deal with it, and public works people who didn't want to deal with it, and on and on. I'm encouraged that we're putting that into our TSP because it gives us finally defined tools. That was part of what I was told, was we don't have any standard for that. Well, now we have a standard for that. And so going forward, I think that, is it going to be hairy sometimes as people get used to 2 giant pickup trucks parked on opposite sides of the street and 2 going opposite directions at the same time? Yeah, people are going to have to learn how to deal with that. But I also trust that we'll learn how to handle it. So it was, I struggle with parts of this document, but in whole, I find it to be right on what I would like to see Monmouth become transportation-wise.
Councilor McKeel.
I just have to say that this has been a really good discussion, and I was probably going to vote no. But after listening to Dad Lopez over there talk about his son and catching butterflies in the planting strip, I feel much better about this plan. So not that I didn't appreciate all the work that you have done, but I just wasn't going to vote for it because I couldn't see a kid getting hurt. But thank you. This has been a really great good discussion. Thank you.
I'm going to say we would never want to see a kid get hurt, and having a plan that encourages that. I don't see a consulting business lasting long if that was what they were offering.
That's a very good point. I am so sorry, Anthony. Did not mean to say anything about that.
No worries. I understand completely. And I appreciate the discussion and the feedback. It really, we don't always get to hear perspectives, right, on the work that we do as consultants. So to hear the discussion is really helpful for me personally. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And he came from the world of alternate transportation, I think is what Councillor Belts told us. Yes, Councillor Ridgway.
Thank you. So the conversation about on-street parking and when we have, it seems like we're moving more towards medium and high density developments in the future. My concern is just practically speaking, if you have less frontage per house for on-street parking and same number of cars, you create a potential sight distance issue at intersections. I know that we have offsets and there's code that requires no parking past, a certain number of feet from a stop sign. But when we narrow streets and potentially reduce speeds, the other piece of that is we're also reducing reaction time for drivers to recognize potential pedestrian crossing the street or bicyclist crossing the street and apply brakes and come to a stop. To me, it might be a wash because you have less time to react and make that decision. Granted, you're going a little bit slower, but you're also being obstructing. Your vision is obstructed by potentially more vehicles. And I've seen as I've gone down narrow streets and there's cars back to back to back, or it's harder to see people that are making that decision to transition from a sidewalk going parallel to you to suddenly they want to cross the street, and you may not see them with as much notice in order to apply brakes. So I don't see that it as a big safety improvement. Just if I'm looking at it as a driver, maybe even going a little slower, being able to recognize cross traffic. I think a lot of these ideas came from a really vocal minority of cyclists, and I know that we have several in the community. I don't think they represent the majority of our residents that depend on driving vehicles with four wheels and using our streets comfortably, having adequate parking, having adequate visibility, accommodating larger sized vehicles like the dualies that Councillor Oberst drives. So there's just a lot of factors that make this really aggressive to me and really abrupt in changing our codes. So I'm not comfortable with it as it is. Now, if there was some moderated view of it or version of it, I think that would take a lot of red ink. But I have some concerns mainly related to drivability.
Yeah, I think an interesting point is not long ago, right? One of the things our Traffic Safety Commission looked at was an intersection that they felt was obstructed. And we don't have a standard that says you only have to have parking clear up to the stop sign. We actually moved it back, right, and painted the yellow strip longer just for that reason. So that's a good point too, right? It constricts parking in that area. But I think that as you look at those, but of course, that was an existing, very old part of town too. So having newer development where they're more considered, but that's an interesting point. But we can take care of some of those things as they come. Yeah. Councillor Lopez, and then we'll try and take a vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel compelled by Councillor Ridgway's comments, and I am a little. I'm sure I'm just not capturing it. I'm a little confused. Are you proposing that you would like less or more availability of on-street parking?
More.
More availability of on-street parking. Okay. Thank you.
At least continue the same.
Gotcha.
Let's see. So can you speak to that then, the on-street parking, because where we, our code encourages less. And so you're talking about the transportation plan or the development code?
And I might be confused on this, but on the transportation plan, if the, maybe it's both. Whichever one speaks to the amount of on-street parking around residential neighborhoods to be developed. Smaller lot sizes are going to equal less space for those residents to park. Unless I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think your questions are more rooted in the land use code, because this is just varying the width. We're not removing or adding or on-street parking at all. So this doesn't obviously control lot widths or things like that. So I think your question is more rooted in what the land use code is.
Okay, that's what I was wondering too. So, which those are other plans we review. Right. Councilor Carey, and then move to a vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the things that we're talking about, the off-street parking and, the lack of that reduction down of that's a couple of those streets that I mentioned, Gwynn, west of 99, those all have, they're double garage. They got double driveway. They still got stuff out in the street. That's the garage has become the extra junk room. So there is that. Yeah. And thanks for the reference on Hoffman Meadows, because that is reassuring. I've been through there only a few times, but in a single family residential setting, that's perfect. We can have local streets though that have multi-family, medium density or even higher, which would drive that demand a little bit higher. But be that as it may, I've softened up on that. But because I was unable to really get a grip on what the projects look like, back and forth between documents and where they were plotted around the city, it may have been obvious, but the big issues that we have in transportation in the city of Monmouth, big picture deals, and that's getting across the Middle Fork of Ash Creek. There's three. We can go 99, you can go Riddle Road, or you can go 16th, and that's it. And there's a lot of development up there, potential development north of that, north of Gentle Woods. And I noticed that there's still the dotted lines for potential future expansion. But is there anything in this plan that advances the solution to that problem?
So we call for numerous, I'm counting 14 street extension projects in this plan. And those are the purple dotted lines that you referred to in the map. They were designed with an eye towards improving connectivity, allowing for residents to have more options for driving to get around, or biking and walking to get around Monmouth. Those street extension projects are primarily there's a few in the south connecting east-west.
Oh, yeah.
And there are several in the north, which are I know is dominated by wetlands and environmentally sensitive areas. And this is an opportunity for me to remind also that any project that's in here at the time that it's being implemented will still have to go through its own processes, its own public processes, its own outreach, and if necessary, its own environmental analysis. This doesn't replace that or eliminate the requirement for that. But going back to the street extensions, we did recognize the need for improved connectivity. And we felt that the street extensions that we proposed did address that. And ideally, as if and when development comes in, that would be something that would be achieved in partnership with developers.
And you're right, the Gwynn Street extension east of 99 was certainly, that'll be a help. And then there's some discussion about west of 99 and perhaps even connecting through to Whitman. That's again one of those purple dotted lines. But I think there was a stretch west of 99 on Gwynn that I thought was one of the projects that, it was, it's a road, it's there, it's gravel, but I'm hoping we can get that fixed. Was that part of that project? I couldn't understand. I just saw the location of it.
No, it was not. That is a project that I'm digging into because there has been some previous work done on that to look at establishing an LID to get that road paved. It's a maintenance nightmare for us to, but it's not as easy to accomplish. We did actually.
So a local improvement district where the neighbors vote to tax themselves to get the public infrastructure.
Prove it to
it's listed
standards
as a project, not on the financially constrained. So what that allows us to do is when development takes place around it, hey, this is a project we've identified. This needs to be upgraded as part of this development. The LID kind of hit a snag because with an LID, the property owners that about the street have to financially participate in the upgrade of that street. And that's kind of been a sticking point trying to pull that off.
I think that's going to be a tough.
It will be, but coming back to what Anthony's been talking about, that's a great opportunity for a grant program, right? To bridge some of those elements. There
won't be any significant development on that section of that street. I think there's one unit that's been built, but that's about it. There just isn't enough there. There's a fair amount of existing inventory there.
Correct. There is a proposed development that is coming in that would be a subdivision at the south end of Stadium and at the intersection of Gwynn and Stadium. And as part of that, they have to do the study necessary to upgrading the facilities that don't have the capacity needed to access their development.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing that I'll talk about that has sort of been my priority as I looked at this, and that's getting bikes off Main Street. I thought I saw that there was a study in there, if I was reading it properly, about perhaps moving the bike lanes to Jackson, both sides of 99.
Yeah, so we want to do a more detailed study on that because obviously that's a lower pressure road for bicyclists. Right now, Main Street is a sharo. They're allowed to ride their bikes in the lane. People driving cars don't understand that. I see it in the community chats all the time. But getting some of that low pressure access for those bicyclists. Jackson was identified obviously because of where the path comes in along 99 and it being the first kind of bigger through street all the way to the west end of town. So we were looking at that, but the trade-off is if you put the bicyclist facilities is you're giving up the on-street parking. Typically, we can look at some alternative sections. I talked to Councilor Oberst last week, I believe, about what some of those options look like. They're doing some really interesting stuff in the Eugene area.
I lived in Eugene for a while, and they're really creative about their street use. And they had one that was two-way parking, two-way traffic. And they took parking out on one side, which gave them room for two-way traffic and two bike lanes. It was a sandwich between South Eugene High School and Amazon Park, and was not heavily parked, and it was a long stretch, no cross streets. But point being, you take out the parking on one side and suddenly you've got room for what you need while not completely removing on-street parking for the people who live there. They just have to know which way to come to their house. So,
Yeah, I'd like to point out too that these standard cross sections are the minimum cross sections. If through their traffic analysis for their development, it requires more, they will be required to do more. These are just our accepted minimum standards.
you look so streamlined, Carol.
I never ride my bicycle on Main Street. So I think you can remove the churros and the bicyclists. I'm always either on Clay or Jackson, you know.
All right, we'll take that up with our Transportation Safety Commission. And I'm gonna hopefully ask if.
Call for the question.
Thank you, Counselor Oberst. Pam, could you please take the roll call on the motion to adopt the transportation system plan?
Counselor Carey,
Aye.
Counselor Lopez,
Aye.
Counselor McKeel,
Yes.
Counselor Oberst,
Yes.
Counselor Ridgway.
Nay.
I have 4 in favor and 1 opposed.
All right, thank you. So the adoption of legislative amendment 25-03, and as Director Carr says, there'll be a resolution coming back to us. And thank you, Anthony. Maybe this is the last time we get to see you for a while, so we well, appreciate you coming over. All right. We do have some guests with us, and I'm going to ask Director Waite if she minds if we move to actually having our presentation from our Arts and Culture Commission before her, if that's all right with the council. I'm going to do that if you don't mind, Sean. I'm going to ask our Arts and Culture Commission members to come up. They've been very patient. We're going to get a little bit of a visit on a work session item for an ordinance they're proposing. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm joined by Melody Barrett tonight here. She is the Arts and Culture Chairperson. So we're here tonight to present to you a draft mural ordinance. This is just a work session. No specific decision needs to be made this evening. But we want to give you the background information, chance to ask questions about it, and provide any feedback you might have on it before we return with a final ordinance, and any additional changes that might come through the public feedback process that we're currently under through the end of the month. So just by way of background information, there's been a lot of excitement around murals. It seems like that's one of the things that's consistent throughout arts and culture, of that interest in doing public murals and having them in the city. They're a great representation of art, original works. They can help discourage graffiti. They can be tourist visitor attractions as well. So, I think that was kind of some of the initial genesis for thinking of like, hey, we want to make a clear pathway for folks that are interested in doing public murals in Monmouth, and have some consistent standards to make sure they're of great quality and that they're maintained over time. So kudos to Melody for doing some research. She's a great researcher on what other communities, kind of some lessons learned of what we can gain from their experience, and to be able to put together a draft ordinance that has since been reviewed by our city attorney as well. And just to kind of walk you through the high points of the ordinance, and then of course we can get into more detail if you have further questions, but the ordinance gives some definitions around what is a mural. We're looking at exterior to the building murals, so not buildings or murals inside of buildings. That's important clarification. And then there are some specific criteria that are laid out, as I had mentioned, that talk about the actual types of materials used and construction of the mural, again, to ensure quality, make sure they're sealed and graffiti resistant, and that we have easements in place to make sure that those murals will be preserved over time, or at least for guaranteed certain amount of time. And that's initially 5 years, and it can be longer, but we just want to make sure that there's an initial commitment by the building owner for that. The approval process involves submitting an application that will be created if this gets adopted, and having that go before the Monmouth Arts and Culture Commission for their review and approval before it gets installed. That is one of their primary roles as a board and commission, is to review public arts and provide that feedback to the city council on those decisions. So initially it would come into the Arts and Culture Commission. There's language in there if it's a historic mural that it would go before the Monmouth Historic Commission as well, because we want to make sure that we get their feedback. And then the next step of the process would be to come here to city council for the council's review and approval. So there are some provisions for public comment. So I want to make this a participatory process. So giving notice to interested parties and allowing the public to comment on that during the process, and setting up an appeal process for the Arts and Culture Commission decision that can be appealed to council within a certain time frame. Melody and I went to the Historic Commission late last month at their last meeting in April, and presented the ordinance to them as well, and got their great feedback, and to check in and make sure that they wanted to be involved in this process, and they indicated to us that yes, they'd like to be involved. We had a good discussion around what is considered historic and whether or not we should attach a specific time frame to that, and we decided against that, because history is constantly being created. So rather to establish a practice where the city staff myself would be like usually the first person that would review the application for the mural, would forward that on to the Historic Commission, and they'd have an opportunity to decide if they wanted to review that, if there was historic content in that as well. So great collaboration and partnership. I think we had a good discussion with them. Councillor McKill was there as well, and some great feedback. So I think those were kind of the highlights of the ordinance. There is a question noted in there about whether or not we should charge an application review fee. I know that's something we've talked about at the budget level, just being really sensitive to things that create some workload for staff, and recouping those fees, as the general fund is a very limited fund right now. So that is a policy consideration for the council to consider and provide some feedback on. We don't have to decide that again tonight, then that's a future thing that would come back through a resolution. Trying to strike that balance between we want to encourage these, so we don't want to set a fee that's going to be really high and might be cost prohibitive for people to bring more public art to our city. So I don't think it's going to be a huge workload, but there will be some staff time to bring it to the commissions and bring it to the council for reports. So with that, I was going to check to see if Melody, if you had anything you wanted that I missed that you wanted to add, or just be here to help me answer questions. Yeah, good.
All right, questions or feedback? They're asking for it. There's your chance, Councillor.
I will make one comment before we go on. I did not invent the wheel. I took the mural ordinance from lots of different McMinnville, Salem, other towns that have mural ordinances. And because we didn't, and that has been one of the things in the Arts and Culture Commission notes since 2007, our minutes. It's definitely come up within our commission, and it's come up within building owners here. There's a strong draw for us to have increased murals here in town. So knowing that we didn't have an ordinance, like I said, I did not invent the wheel. I just pulled things in from other sources. So, and it went to Lane initially, and then it got put on hold till our new attorney came in, and so it's been there and back.
Double
Thanks for
legal
that.
review. Yeah.
Councilor Lope.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I love public art. I'm so excited that this is coming before us, and that, you know, sometimes if you build a clear pathway to something, it actually encourages that thing because it creates more awareness that, gosh, this is actually possible and, you know, maybe important to a community. So I'm very excited to see this. I have a couple questions about the, you know, the historic mural and the approval process, right? And so I love that you're crossing those bounds, or not bounds, but crossing those silos, right? And pulling in, you know, the views of historic murals, or not historic murals, but the Historic Commission. And I think that that's, you know, something that we've asked for more of. So I love seeing it codified here in the document. I'm a little confused about the maybe it's the definition of the different kinds of murals and the approval pathways. So please bear with me as I dive into it just a little bit. So on page, it is page 65 of the packet. Definitions, we have a definition for historic murals. So it depicts something that is related to state, local, and national history. It has a definition of a mural, a definition of an original art mural, which is not historic, but original and artistic. Not that historic can't be artistic too. And then that definition of a public mural. And so to me, it seems that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that, you know, mural is the highest overarching thing, right? Then within that, we have historic murals and original art murals. And then within that, we have those that are historic and original art that occur in the public. And that those ones that are historic, original art, and occurring in the public are, you know, are what this governs, right? And so when I look at the approval pathways, now I'm going to get even deeper. If we go to page 66 of the packet at the top, 12.30.030, it talks about approval by the Arts and Culture Commission, and with respect to historic murals, the Monmouth Historical Commission, and a permit from the city. But then it goes down to kind of talk a little bit about approval of public mural. It says that the last sentence of that, it says approval of a public mural does not require historic design review unless the mural is located on the exterior wall of a designated historic landmark, right? And so I think I'm just getting a little tripped up, because up above, it says that it does require it if it's a historic mural. And so thinking about someone who's reading this and trying to create a clear pathway to do it, I'm worried they might see it the same way. And I think I see the intent here that, gosh, if a mural's on a historic building, dang it, the Historic Commission, doesn't matter what kind of mural, the Historic Commission should probably look at that. And then if it's a historic mural, so a mural depicting a historic scene, the Historic Commission should also look at that. But in here, it seems to say almost two different things. At one, it says that they won't, and then at one sentence, it says that they will, right? The top sentence and the bottom sentence of that paragraph. Or maybe I'm reading it wrong.
No, I'm glad you brought this up. We actually had quite a bit of discussion about it at the Arts and Culture Commission meeting, looking at it from two different lenses. And so the distinction in that last sentence And actually, I was the one that kind of wanted that in there because I saw, oh, a public mural doesn't have to go to historic review. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. If it is on a National Register building, then that is absolutely a historic alteration that we do have city historic codes that regulate that we would look at and go through actually a land use process to review and approve that. So there's a better way to like say that, we're open to, I mean, we massaged it a couple of times, I think already, that language, but that's the distinction, is that last sentence is really just about those limited buildings that are on like a national register or they're a local historic landmark. They have a designation. So there's like a dozen of them inside of our city. So it doesn't apply very often, but if somebody just picked this up and didn't look at the rest of our code, we're trying to make those pathways clear.
And I think the phrase there, does not require historic design review, it must refer to a process completely outside of this, that there's some other historic design review process.
Yeah.
So maybe instead of making this an exclusion, if you make it an affirmative and say, instead of that does not require historic design review, say, if the mural is to be located on the exterior wall of a designated blah, 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 it will require an additional historic design review. So maybe that makes more sense, because
that makes a lot more sense to me. And then that also implies that, gosh, if, or maybe not implies, but states that, gosh, if I'm doing a historic mural on an historic building, it might actually need two separate reviews from the Historic Commission, one with different criteria, right? And so that I would be comfortable with that wording.
Yeah, so we'll work with the city attorney to make sure that says what we think that is supposed to say.
Thank you.
And that was the point I was going to make too. It's just, if you're going to paint a mural on a National Trust building, different rules apply. Please see Suzanne. That's the code language right there. You're working for us forever now, just to know.
Right. Other thoughts, feedback? Yes, Councilor Carey.
I'm just reading, as you're doing your presentation, I was rereading here, but give me an idea of how the flow might work. Because I could see it in a couple different ways. You have an artist who does murals, and they have spotted a wall in Monmouth, and so they're going to come and do an application to do that. Funding aside, let's just forget that. And then the other might be that the Arts and Culture Commission has spotted a very nice, attractive wall that could be for a nice mural, and there could be an RFP that goes out, to artists, local artists, and otherwise. Are those two things? Could they both happen?
Yes, they both can happen at the same time. In fact, we've already discussed that. It would be in the application process, in the application packet. Are you an artist applying for, a specific, maybe the artist is approaching and saying, yes, I've got this great design. I'd like to apply to provide a mural here in town. Generally speaking, it's going to come from the building owner, or because that's where it's already come. There's like 3 different building owners that want to have murals. So it's going to come that way. And then there would be a call for art put out, unless that building owner also knows an artist. There's nothing wrong with having a private building owner say, I've got this great mural friend and here's their design and we've paid the fee and it goes with the application. And then we get that. And, those are, at least I don't see any issue with that being the case if they're the building owner and they provide the art. Now, it depends upon what the art looks like too. It depends upon the artist's experience and skills and that kind of thing. We're not going to just rubber stamp everything, but we're also not going to sit there and say, oh, well, you drew outside the lines. It's kind of the point, there's artistic creativity. Again, these are for, generally speaking, they're for a limited time with a maintenance contract. So, 5 years being the minimum. That way, if building sells, the new owners, they really didn't like the sunflowers. Okay, fine, the contract's done, and they can paint over it. We're trying to look at all those different factors.
So what role would in that case, the property owner have in the approval? Or would they just simply pass that on?
No,
through
the
process?
property owner, so the way we were envisioning it is that the property owner would be potentially the one filling out the application. So they're going to be part of the approval process, obviously. We're still working on exactly how that workflow is going to go. We've had a couple of murals here in town that have taken place, but they've been kind of offshoots. One was many, many years ago. And then the historic railroad one, Suzanne can speak to that. I have no knowledge really of that one at all. So we're looking at best practices for those kind of processes with the applications.
Yeah, just quickly would comment. I mean, I think there are multiple avenues and pathways for murals, public murals to come to us and get installed. And, my goal as a liaison to arts and culture is to help make it as easy as possible to navigate those, right? So whether it is a building owner, we have great resources through the Arts and Culture Commission to be able to connect that building owner with artists, with local artists that can come up with some designs through an RFP process. If they're a local artist, but they don't have a building or an easement secured, we have connections with potential building owners that might be interested in working with them. So it's a little bit of matchmaking, and there's not like one specific path, that you have to follow. I mean, this ordinance does give us that permit process that all of them will need to follow, but like how they get into that application is going to vary depending on who's leading the project. Mm-hmm.
Councilor Roberts.
So let's say a building owner decided they wanted to paint something on the side of their wall, like a giant bug. And we told them that we really thought they should go through the mural painting process. And they said no, and painted the bug anyway. And how do we handle a thing like that? If a building owner just says, I'm going to put up a mural, tough on you, private property, how do we address that? What does the ordinance say about, sorry, you can't do that. You're going to have to take that off or whatever. I'm just curious, and do we have anything to say about a thing like that? I don't know. I'm asking.
Well, that's why we are doing the mural ordinance, because the bug went up and we didn't have anything. We don't have anything in our planning. A little line under signs about murals. And so, yeah, that's why we're doing this. Now, as to what kind of teeth, that's a city council decision to say.
Because I like the bug, but I would like the bug to have gone through an approval process.
Well,
just like what we've set up here. And I'm just, like I said, if somebody else decided they wanted to follow that pathway, how do we deal with that?
So maybe a way of asking a question is, you've reviewed bunches of sign ordinances. Were there some that had penalties for not following the process?
Not that I saw specifically, or not that I'm remembering. This I did about 2.5 years ago now. So yeah, and I think that would be, I don't know whether would that fall under, this is where I don't know these things. Would that fall under the mural ordinance to put something in to say, here's your penalty if you do this and you have to paint over?
Yeah, so every time somebody says sign ordinance, I kind of start to involuntarily twitch. You can put penalties in there or enforcement if you want, but that is a difficult area to enforce. There's all kinds of, you get into content regulations, when you get into any kind of sign code stuff. I think it's probably safer to leave it at a level where it's maybe has less teeth and feels more advisory. Just because that is something the cities struggle with and they get in trouble over.
Unless you have an historic district or you have some other design standard that applies, right?
Right. Yeah. If it's something like, you can't paint a goofy graffiti thing on your historic building, that's a completely different kind of thing. But when you start getting into, does the artistic value of this, weighing that starts to get a little more of a problem.
All right. Any other feedback? Otherwise, not seeing a huge appetite for teeth. All right.
Oh, Councilor
Yeah.
Lopez, I wanted to also address underneath our definitions. I'm glad you pointed that out. They should be in a little bit of a different order, and we will address that.
All right. We will see this come back to us. Thank you very much. Thanks for not dropping this, Melody. I know it has been a passion. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
all right. And now I hate to do this, but I think it's best if we offer a break, if we can keep it to 5 to 7 minutes to return. And then we'll hear our finance report and head into quick reports before our urban renewal session. Thank you. Alrighty. Reconvene. My gosh, there's been a technology breakthrough, say, but come on up, Sean. Say rep. A technology breakthrough in headsets. Plug into that and then it works better than the, okay.
This is awesome.
Sorry, everybody. Return to our business agenda with a presentation on our third quarter financial report from our finance director, who hasn't had anything else to do except prepare this. Hi, Sean.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. This is our third quarter financial review. A lot of this is going to be a little redundant from the conversations that we've had with the Budget Committee, but I'll go ahead and dig in. The report that you have in front of you represents the financial position as of March 31st, 2026, or approximately 75% through the fiscal year. Overall, the city continues to experience stable and generally positive financial results across most operating funds, and most revenues and expenditures are tracking within expected ranges, with several timing related variances. So when you think about the shared revenue that we receive from the state, that comes in quarterly, and so that may reflect that it's trending behind or lagging, but we'll actually see another payment of that before the end of the fiscal year. General fund revenues, property tax revenue remains strong. We've collected approximately 97% as of March 31st, and we're pretty close to 100% as of today. Local marijuana tax revenues have slightly exceeded our budgeted amount, which is always good. I talked about state shared revenue a little bit. Franchise fee revenues are slightly below projections, but are expected to improve as additional payments continue to be received throughout the remaining of the fiscal year. Most general fund departments are currently trending below budget, due largely to savings within the material and services line items. The Parks Department, as you may have noticed in the report, is slightly above 75% benchmark, and this is due to some seasonal position costs. I will be working with the Public Works Director and doing some forecasting for the end of the fiscal year, and be coming back to council with a supplemental budget at the second meeting in June for consideration. Court expenditures have shifted slightly. As we had talked about during the Budget Committee meeting, with criminal court moving to the county, we're now just seeing the citation revenue come in, and so we're shifting some of only to one court a month instead of two, so we're reducing costs there. One of the most significant financial trends this year continues to be the slowdown in development, which is impacting our building revenue in particular. We don't believe that this is a sign that development isn't going to happen. It's just timing. And so we anticipate that while Suzanne's group is continuing to work with businesses and bring in development, and there are conversations going on, the timing just hasn't been what we anticipated. So we do anticipate that some development revenue will come in, of course, in next fiscal year. This also impacts those system development charges, where we anticipated some of that development to occur. And so we are seeing some lag in our system development revenue as well. With that said, though, while revenues are a little lower in some of these areas, some of the long-term infrastructure needs and projects have been delayed for various reasons, whether it's planning
or timing and of materials and services coming in. So we're still very stable in our financial position. The urban renewal budget, originally anticipated, like we had talked about, the $5 million in additional debt. We opted not to take that out. And so that revenue appears to be very, very low, but that's intentional. And those projects associated with that revenue is not moving forward as well. Enterprise funds, including water, stormwater, power and light, are performing as expected. Sewer revenues are a little below budget, but that's okay because some of the projects that were going to be funded, again, have not moved forward. So we will end the year just fine there. The gas fund revenues are slightly ahead of projections, which is encouraging. However, as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, because of the increased prices, although we are passing on those increases to our customers, there is a lag between when we get that revenue. So we'll be keeping an eye on that and making sure we stay within our appropriated budget. Again, I talked a little bit about the capital projects and delays that are happening there. So there is some significant cost savings that will be carried over into next fiscal year and projects carried out then. And just in closing, overall, the city remains in stable financial position through the third quarter, despite some slower development activity and some revenue timing variances. I'll continue to work with our department heads on the forecasting for the end of the fiscal year and bring forward in June any recommendations for a supplemental budget. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councilor Ridgway.
Thank you. Can you just speak to I've seen 2 recent job postings. Were those filling previous vacancies or are those new positions?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the positions, the finance analyst position, so the individual that currently holds that position actually retired and is working back. She will end her employment officially in first part of September. And so we're in the recruitment phase and I'm hoping to get somebody on board so we can do some training. So there's not a break in that work. The second position was our accounting technician. She resigned from her position and accepted another position. So we're going to be recruiting for that one as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Carey and then Councilor Lopez.
Just 2, and I might have missed, but your explanation on the state shared revenue being down, we're only 55%. There's a time lag there, I'm sure, but that's a lot to make up in a quarter.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Carey. So in April, so right after March close, we got another state shared revenue. It's kind of the quarterly batch that comes in. And so we received that in April. We'll receive part of the rest of it in June and then the rest of it first part of July, which will accrue back to June.
Okay, good. And then you noted some of the capital improvement projects that are not going to go forward, but will be rolled into the next year. When we talk about it in the budget committee, we really need to note those and be able to track those forward. They're all good. They're things that need to be done and we'll be happy to do it. But I think it's really important that we identify that was budgeted but not used, and then pass that forward to the following year. As that's ad infinitum. We've talked about that, but and I think you were on side with that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Lowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for the in-depth view of the budget here. I recognize that this is your first quarterly financial report at Monmouth, and I just wanted to express that I'm impressed by the quality of the report and the narrative accompanying it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have a question going one level deeper about the development and the pacing thereof, right? And I understand that you indicated that it may be lagging due to timing issues. And I'm curious if we have any indications, or if we can gain any indications from other communities if they're doing the same, if they're experiencing something similar, right? Because my thought is, well, it's likely, it seems like it's likely timing, but I'm curious if it's things that are, things filtering down from the macroeconomic level, or things, maybe an unintended result of something that we've done here in the past.
Thank you for the question. And I can, at a high level, tell you what I'm seeing in other communities, and there is a slowdown. And not all of it's timing. Some of it has to do with interest rates, but to get specific here in Monmouth, I would have to defer to Suzanne, if she wouldn't mind coming up.
And for the record, I'm happy for all these things to come in a staff report later if we don't have it off the top of our head. My apologies.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have a lot of more detail, I guess, to add at this point, because I think we're still navigating that and trying to figure out, are there just delays in projects because they're waiting for more favorable interest rates, and they're still planning to move forward, as we've heard in many of the cases. But it kind of depends on the project. In the case of the Riddle Road apartments up on Hoxton Street, so they're about 60%, a little over half built out of that approved development. And they're waiting for the existing buildings to lease up to like 75% occupancy before they go forward with the remaining buildings. So in their case, they're saying it's been taking a little longer than anticipated because there were students in leases at that time of year when they got their occupancy. So they're anticipating they'll see more this summer and into the fall. So remain positively optimistic that we'll still see it, but it's definitely, we're feeling it like this time of year, we'd have more applications, I'd say, in the hopper. Single family subdivision activity, as we've talked about, and the reasons for the land swap is that we just don't have that base of large vacant low density residential parcels in particular, for people to build on that don't have huge environmental constraints or infrastructure costs associated with them. I think some of it that's also impacting us is from the university. And so they just usually have big projects that roll into the next big capital project. After Student Success Center would usually get their data center, not a huge Facebook type data center, but the data center that they needed to support Western Oregon University. They're still, as I understand it, securing funding to make that project go forward, but they're still planning to go forward with the design. So some delays in that because a lot of the bids are coming back higher, right, for the work. And so it's taking longer to put together, the funding that goes with some of those things. So I think there's just a number of factors that are impacting that, and hopefully it will be short weathered and we'll see that uptick, next building cycle. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit window into some of the things that we're hearing here locally.
Yeah, that's very helpful to know. Thank you both.
Other questions? All right. Thank you so much for that. And that will take us to the reports portion of our agenda this evening. I'll start off with the mayor's report. And one of the things I got to do this past weekend was actually attend the TEDx event at Western Oregon University. So TED Talks are well known. TEDx events are more locally designed, and there are some folks in our community who have been doing this for a while. They actually were called TEDx Mount Hood, but she's now located here and brought this event. I must say, in competition with our AAPI festival, and there were a lot of things going on downtown. They did a tremendous job, and I really want to talk a little bit about the way they designed this event. It's an all-day event, and there's a lunch break. There's a admission cost that covers that. Rather than have some catered event on campus, they made arrangements with our local restaurants to have attendees go out to lunch. So everyone in attendance was given a choice of 5 downtown Monmouth establishments. And then people just went together and spent time in these restaurants. They allotted about an hour and a half. So folks were very visibly walking downtown. Quite a few stopped through the festival. But it was a really neat event. And I will tell you, I walked into Rice Auditorium. There are 3 people I saw all day that I know. One of them was Mayor Schwarzler. One was our former chamber director, Nikki Marizani, and her sister, who is our adult librarian. Everybody else and everyone I met with, spoke with, gathered with, was from the Portland metro area. And they have a Portland TED event. And they all said, "But we thought this would be really fun to come down here." I met over a dozen people who had never been to Monmouth. And they're all going, "Oh, this is so cute and great restaurants." And so it was a really wonderful event to have, and another good opportunity to partner with our campus folks. So that is something that I really wanted to put forward as an activity. And again, personally, just so excited about our Chiefs Award. I think it was an honor to get to see that and do that. And he looked surprised. I don't know if y'all saw the social media, but didn't look like he was preparing to stand up there with a bunch of guys in suits and ties and accept an award. So, and it is a gigantic plaque. Did you guys notice that? So hope that is displayed, and I'm very proud of it. And that we go to reports of boards and commissions. I will mention that MyNet has its budget meeting coming up. So, and we'll be getting more information. Sean is now our representative on there, and we'll be bringing back answers to questions that came up at the budget committee about how those debt service payments for prior debt are coming in, and then how they're applied here at the city. But they actually, MyNet again continues to be in pretty good condition. They are finding some supply chain issues, which I guess we should anticipate with a lot of the specialty materials that they use. But we are also, MyNet is trying to get a lot of inquiry from other communities, counties, and jurisdictions. And what they'd like to have is MyNet sort of be their operator of their fiber systems. So not probably going to happen, but it's great to know we are still considered a real pioneer in this area. So I will pass this on to other board and commission reports. What do we have? Councilor McKeel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a short report from the Historic Commission. The May 9th historic event was a great success. We had our mayor and Councilor Lopez and Councilor Belts all gave presentations reading from the really great historic document that was made by one of the commissioners. The meeting that we had on April 28th, they're getting the display ready for artifacts that are going to be they'll put in artifacts and they'll just rotate the collection. So they have lots of good stuff to see there. And the other part I was going to talk about was meeting with Chairperson Barrett to talk about the arts and culture mural ordinance. So it was a really great discussion. We talked for a long time about the meaning of historic. So I was waiting for Councilor Lopez to ask about that meaning, but yeah. And that was that.
All right, other Councilor Carey.
Planning Commission, Madam Mayor, members of the council, will be meeting tomorrow evening in a work session that's focused on community engagement and how to best engage citizens, residents in the development process and planning process. You know, we've been skewered irresponsibly, in my opinion, about lack of transparency and didn't get people involved in all of that. Well, this, I think, is a response to make sure that we're doing things in the best possible way. Because there will be some significant land use decisions coming down the pike. So I think it's kudos to Suzanne for thinking of this and matching with the goals of the council and so forth. So it'll be a good session. That's tomorrow night right here in River City, 7 p.m.
Who's going to tell them there's no river around here? Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless, my apologies. Yes, the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance met since our last meeting, and a couple things kind of coming down the pike, right? One that occurred in the meeting, they were, as a region, we were granted $500,000 additional dollars from OHCS for long-term rental assistance. Now, that doesn't all come to Monmouth, but a portion does, and some of that will ultimately flow through Polk County Family Community Outreach. These are funds that were dedicated to this purpose by the state legislature that ultimately were unspent in other portions of the state. And so this is, the Alliance working for the people of, Marion, Polk counties and Monmouth. And so big positive there. Moving forward, everyone is eagerly anticipating the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which comes through HUD, which is the primary way that projects under the purview of the Alliance are funded. You may recall a handful of months ago, some discussion about, some potential NOFOs that were stopped by legal action in I believe it was the Second Circuit Court. So within the next couple of weeks, it is anticipated that HUD will release a new NOFO, which will prompt the Homeless Alliance to engage in that process throughout the month of, largely throughout the month of June. The reason that I mention this now, because we do not know the details of this NOFO, but there will be opportunities for community members or individuals of lived experience to participate in the review and recommendations committee and other functions surrounding that. And so as soon as I have those, I'll try to pass them along to the city in case there are individuals from our community that would like to participate in that process. Also, they're going through their budget committee work as well. We have a meeting scheduled for next week, which fingers crossed we will come out of with a budget. If not, we'll be cutting it a little close. It'll be the week after. So more to come there as well. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay. And briefly, since we are approaching the 9 o'clock, we have our urban renewal. Thank you.
So just real quickly, we have all heard this at budget, but the senior advisory board heard about a grant that the senior center received to fund a driver for the bus that we already own. To do more than just take seniors out on trips. They will now be available to pick folks up at home, take them for a variety, if you need to go to the store, if you need to go to Salem, the bus will become available for those kinds of trips as well with I believe it's 48-hour notice of your intended trip. We already have through West Valley Hospital's Connections van. They used to be able to pick you up and take you to Salem Health appointments. They will now pick you up and take you to any medical appointment that you need to make it to. So there's two new forms of transportation available in the community for those either who are ailing and unable to get to their medical appointments and or seniors who can't get where they need to go. They'll be able to get a ride to the senior center. So that is still perking. We need to hire a driver. It's not up and running yet. I'll let you know what it is.
Great, thanks. All right, so our city manager, Rochelle Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a lot this evening, but I did want to make one comment. Today at the management meeting, I directed the directors that for the budget next year, if there's any projects that they have budgeted for that they aren't able to complete, that they will include that as part of their narrative going forward, and that they will also present on that as well. So I think that will keep that in line and keep the tracking going, which has been brought up several times. And so I wanted to make sure that you knew that that has been directed. Other than that, I don't have anything else because you've all covered everything else I had. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, and I did have, we had a couple of applications for board and commissions. There was one I wanted to bring forward tonight, and that was for Belinda Strout. She applied for the library board, and we do have openings on the library board. Mentioned that she's lived here for 24 years, and one of the first things she did was to be able to get her library card in our community. So I would like to ask for your permission to appoint Belinda Strout to the library board.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, Councilor Oberst and Councilor McKeel. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Great, thank you. All right, and with that, a motion to adjourn, and we will quickly conduct an urban.
I would just like to make a quick announcement. So just an announcement, Pride is coming up. We have our annual Pride celebration on Saturday, June 6th, 10 to 2, right here in Main Street Park Amphitheater. We have some really amazing music this time coming up and some performances, so you want to be there. Juneteenth will be Friday, June 19th, 5:30 to 8. We will still give away the pulled pork sandwiches, so come for that. But we have Rich McLeod coming from Salem, which is a hot jazz artist, so we'll have some great music for Juneteenth this year.
If I can also add, please come to Pride for the food. You'll have some city councilors cooking food there too.
With Lopez at the grill, it's guaranteed salmonella. You can bank on it.
Best hot dogs in town.
We have our health license. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, it's getting late. We better adjourn and move on. All right.
Move adjournment.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So I would like to call to order the Tuesday, May 19th meeting of the Monmouth Urban Renewal Agency and ask Pamela Dornbush for the roll call, please.
Councilor Ridgway.
Here.
Councilor Oberst.
Here.
Councilor McKeel.
Here.
Councilor Lopez.
Present.
Councilor Carey.
It's Mr. Carey. I'm present.
Mayor Kuntz.
I'm not the mayor. I am the
Oh, you're Ms.
chairperson
Kuntz.
of
I
the board.
apologize.
However, I am present and Ms. Belts is excused. At this point, do we have any public comments for the Urban Renewal Agency? Seeing none, we do have a consent calendar, and our last meeting was the meeting of February 3rd. Those minutes were included in the packet.
I move to accept the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McKeel for the motion and Mr. Ridgway for the second. And that brings us to our business agenda items. Suzanne Duffner is coming forward. We do have a facade improvement grant application.
All right. Good evening, agency members. I'm here tonight to present the staff report for a new facade grant.
We didn't vote on the consent calendar. I'm just trying to cut minutes here. So all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Duffner. Please continue.
Sorry to cut in there, Suzanne. All right. Wonderful. So I am here tonight to present a facade improvement grant application for 159 Main Street West. This property is better known as the upcoming Lucky Crow Restaurant and Farm Stand Eatery. So right there on the alley next to City Hall where Maui Melts used to be. And we received an application for one half the cost of their project work for a facade improvement. This is to do installation of signage, replace the front entryway door, install some exterior lighting, and some new landscaping. So really help spruce up the outside of the building. They've done a number of wonderful improvements to the inside of the building space, just made it look really great. That the city, or excuse me, the Urban Renewal Agency did approve a general grant assistance request back in January. So if the name of the applicant sounded familiar, that's what that was for, the $15,000 to do the interior building renovations and remodeling, work on the plumbing, the electrical, and getting it set up for the new restaurant. So that was just under $92,000 worth of private improvements that were put into that project. So now turning to the outside of the building again and getting that spruced up to provide a very inviting and attractive facade, which is consistent with the goals of our facade grant program. Those are all eligible activities. And so staff is recommending approval of the up to $5,000 in grant expenses, but it can't exceed one half of actual cost of the project. So we do have estimates totaling $4,450 for the 50% grant applicant match. The recommendation again is to approve that, and we're just looking forward to that restaurant space opening up soon and adding to our downtown. There's some additional application information in your packet, a summary of the work that's being done, permission from the property building owner. There's some photos of the existing building space, and then some renderings of the improvements that are proposed. For illustrative purposes, a cost estimate has also been provided. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
Mr. Carey?
This all looks good. It looks very consistent with what we've done in the past. The only thing that I wonder about are the planters. In the past, we normally focus on things that are attached to the building. I don't remember ever having something that can be moved around and moved arguably to another property at some point. Is there anything in our code that would require attachment to the building, for example, or something more stationary?
Yeah, thank you for that question. When we think of urban renewal, we think of typically things that are permanent and attached. Landscaping is one of the eligible elements that we've always had in our facade grant program. And it doesn't specify that it has to be, planted in soil in the ground versus in a planter. And this is all hardscape on the site. So in downtown areas, it is pretty much accepted or given that you'd have it in pots or larger planters. So I don't believe there's any issues with funding that. We do have an itemized breakout of that as well if there's concern about that. But like I said, we've had that facade grant program and landscaping as an eligible project for I think at least 10 years that I'm aware of, and maybe longer as well. And it hasn't been challenged or an issue with that I'm aware of.
Go ahead.
Just to follow, then as I'm looking at the cost estimates for the landscaping piece, and I'm seeing a schematic that has 6 pots. What all does that include? We're planting. Are we I mean, we got $400 for labor to do 6 planters. Is it more than that?
Yeah. There are some additional landscape beds already on the property. So we actually have the applicants here, the business owners, and if it's okay, we'd like to invite them to maybe come up and give a little bit more insight into that. Okay, here's Eden.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we had originally, there are 2 planters on either side of the front doorway. And we had originally planned on planting those out. That actually changed with the landowners' suggestions. And so we will be putting pots in them and we will be putting pots around them, but we will not physically be planting in them. Was that the question?
Well, yes, the question, I mean, because typically, you know, things that we fund on this, and I'm supportive of it, but are attached to the building. And, or, as Suzanne said, and it doesn't specify, but typically would be planted in the ground. And it appears that there are 6 planters.
Yes, there are 2 planters physically in the ground, and then there will also be additional planters along the patio area to be trellised above on a pre-existing trellis structure that currently also has grapes that will be maintained on that. So both are part of that application, both physical planters that pre-exist in the ground as well as the potted planters that we will be adding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Oberst.
So to follow up with John's question, I look at the last photo, page 18 of our packet, and there are little wells along the side of the building surrounded with concrete curb. And I'm assuming that those are some of the planters of which you speak, that you will extract the existing vegetation, dirt, and other stuff. And
Yeah, and not the ones that you can see there. Those are actually
is the
not
one
in
that's
front of our.
way at the back that sticks out a little farther, is that one of
We will
yours?
be maintaining those.
Okay.
Correct, yes.
And then I have to scroll back up. Give me a second. I'm going as fast as I can, Madam Mayor. I'm a slow scrolling guy. Because I would like to, for the purposes of discussion, move to approve the facade grant improvement application for 1/2 the eligible product cost expense up to $5,000 for the property located at 159 Main Street West.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oberst, for the motion and Mr. Lopez for the second. Any additional questions or comments? All right, could you please take the roll call?
Mr. Carey,
Aye.
Mr. Lopez,
Aye.
Ms. McKeel,
Yes.
Mr. Oberst,
Aye.
Mr. Ridgway,
Aye.
Ms. Coons.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Keep them coming so I can vote. All right, and with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move approval, move adjournment, one of those things, move adjournment.
All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody, and thank you for your patience this evening.